Alright, welcome back. In today's lesson, we're going to cover two really important common rook sacrifices that if you're a serious chess player, you need to know. And we're going to start with rook takes h7. So let's go back one. We've got our blackboard ready, we've got our position set up on the left. What can we see in this position? We see a fianchettoed bishop where white is controlling that long diagonal. We need to find a way to break through, so you should always look for this rook takes h7 sacrifice, because once the king takes, the other rook slides across and checkmates the king, supported by the bishop on b2. Now I'm going to go through a few examples with different sacrifices, but feel free to come back and play this video so you can really understand the sacrifice in a bit more detail. But that was the first one, rook takes h7. This next one, can anyone spot what the mating pattern is? Write it in the comments. Otherwise, rook h8. And what are we trying to do with this? Well, we're simply going to go check and sacrifice another rook as well. And once the king takes, the real plan opens up, which is queen h1 check, with the queen finishing and checkmating the king on h7. So let's go back to the start. Why is this a really important pattern to understand? Well, it's very rare that you'll naturally look to sacrifice two rooks. So that's why this pattern is one that you just need to know in your head, that anytime there's an open h file, rook to h8 is always a move to consider, because what you're doing essentially is you're trying to lure the king onto the h8 square so that your king can, so that your queen can come onto the h file with check, with tempo essentially, so that your opponent doesn't have the chance to parry it, so you or lose a turn that way. So let's add a few more pieces on this board. Same position with a few more pieces. Again, it's actually mate in 8, but it should be very easy to spot the win here once we know the pattern. So we don't have to do much calculation. Bishop takes h7, bishop d3 check, and here technically black has the queen sacrifice to gain a move, but let's just keep it simple. Check, takes, check. So it's really beautiful wins that you can get, really beautiful finishes I should say, with the rook sacrifices on the h file. And that leads us to the g file. So again, if you're a serious attacking player, you need to know how to spot these patterns and sacrifice your rook on the g file. Obviously there's no rook here, but what you're looking for is a setup where your opponent has a standard castle position and a pawn on g6, or a pawn on g7, which is very typical, where you will force them to push the pawn up and they don't have a bishop on g7, a fianchettoed bishop, to be a key defensive piece in their position. How do we get to this position, and how does a rook on g1 even happen? So let's go back a few moves and I'll show you a realistic way that this happens in a game. So I'm just going to add a few more pieces back onto here. A very common attacking concept for white is to play g4. And you might think, well, Philip, my name's Philip, by the way, I'm a 2100 FedEx rated player from New Zealand, and the reason I make these videos is to help you improve your chess. I should have said that at the start, but here we are, halfway through the video. What we're trying to do here is sacrifice that g-pawn, because if black, let's just go back one. If black plays a random move, we're essentially just trying to start an attack this way. And by playing g4 off the bat, we're essentially just saying, hey, black, do you want to fall for my sacrifice? It's a risk. It's not a winning move by any stretch, but what you end up doing is you win a tempo by moving the rook to g1, and when the knight comes back, you have an open file. So you're threatening things like rook takes g7 off the bat, but what we're going to study now is what happens if you force the pawn to move to G6. So let's just add a few more pieces just to illustrate the types of sacrifices you want to be looking for when you achieve this type of position. The types of sacrifices are a rook takes G6 sacrifice. However, you don't want to sacrifice the rook first. What you always want to do is look for a minor piece of sacrifice. So that might be a knight on E5 to take on G6. Bishop takes G6. H takes. Rook takes. Check. And now you've blasted open the opponent's king. Here, the opponent coming here doesn't really solve their problems because now you're just going to checkmate them in a couple of moves. So taking the rook, and now you've sacrificed the bishop and a rook, but you've cleaned out the opponent's kingside defenses, and now in a typical game, you might be able to slide your bishop over and checkmate this way, right? Or if we go back one, you might want to go rook e3, sliding the rook across, just a classic rook lift, depending on the position. But these are the types of moves you should be looking for, and that's why sacrificing a minor piece and then the rook on G6, followed by usually, almost always actually, in a winning attack, a winning sacrifice, finishing with the queen on G6, and the king is really in dire straits there. So there you have it, two very key sacrifices, rook sacrifices that you need to know in your games. You need to be able to spot them very quickly because either your opponent's going to beat you or you're going to beat your opponent. So really keep your eyes out for them. I hope you enjoyed the video. Check out the other ones. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.